I was 57 when the deal went through. After decades of grinding, early mornings, late nights, and projects that barely kept the lights on, I finally hit a break. A piece of land I'd held for years was rezoned and sold. Overnight, money that once felt like a slow trickle turned into a steady flow. I thought my wife, Sharon, would be proud. We'd spent years pinching pennies, arguing over bills, and sacrificing vacations for the sake of our kids' future. I thought this was the moment she'd breathe easy, maybe even thank me for holding the line so long. But pride wasn't what I saw in her eyes. It was fear. If you've ever been betrayed by the very person who should have celebrated you, you'll feel this story in your bones. Hit like, drop a comment with your name, and state for a shout-out in the next story, and subscribe for the unfolding justice. At first, it showed in small jabs. Don't let this go to your head. Or, money changes people, Tom. Then it grew sharper. She questioned where every dollar went, accused me of hiding things, reminded me, often, that she was the reason I ever stayed grounded. I didn't argue. I thought it was just adjustment, that she'd settle into it. But then one evening, I came home to find two men in suits sitting at my dining table. They introduced themselves as investigators from the State Financial Crimes Division. Someone had filed an anonymous report. Accusations of fraud. The truth came out quickly. Sharon was the one who called them. My own wife. She wasn't worried I was breaking the law. She was worried I'd outgrow her. That my success would shift the balance of control she'd held in our marriage for 30 years. That night, as the investigators flipped through my files, I caught her watching me from the corner of the room, her arms crossed, her lips tight in a small, victorious smile. What she didn't know was that she hadn't set me up for ruin. She'd set herself up for shame. The investigation was thorough. Every account, every receipt, every contract I'd signed was dragged under a microscope. I cooperated fully, calm as a stone. I had nothing to hide. But Sharon's behavior during those weeks told the real story. She stopped speaking to me unless the children were in the room. She avoided eye contact, clung to the investigators like they were her shield. When our son asked why men in suits were always visiting, she said, "Your father has secrets." It cut deep. The kids, both in their 20s, tried to keep steady. They asked me directly if I had done anything wrong. I told them the truth. I worked hard, I got lucky, and now I'm paying the price for someone's jealousy. I didn't mention their mother's name, not yet, but cracks began forming in their trust toward her. They noticed how her story kept shifting, how she grew smug whenever the investigators came by. One evening, my daughter whispered to me, "Dad, it's like she wants you to fall." Inside our house, the air grew thick with division. Meals were tense, conversation clipped. Sharon strutted with a kind of false righteousness, convinced she'd put me in my place before I grew too powerful. But what she failed to understand was this. The truth has a way of clearing its throat, and sooner or later, everyone hears it. The day would come when investigators closed their files. And when that day arrived, the person left with questions to answer wouldn't be me. It took 3 months. 3 months of strangers combing through my life, of Sharon watching me like a hawk, waiting for the hammer to fall. When the investigators returned for their final visit, I sat across from them at my kitchen table. Sharon hovered in the corner, arms folded, eyes sharp with expectation. One of the men cleared his throat. "Mr. Dalton, our review found no evidence of fraud, embezzlement, or illegal activity. Your financial gains are legitimate. As far as the state is concerned, you're clear." I glanced at Sharon. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The small smile she had worn for months gone. The men packed their files and shook my hand. One of them added, almost casually, "It's unfortunate when reports are made out of personal motives. We see it more often than you'd think." After they left, the silence in the house was deafening. Sharon tried to speak, but the children had heard every word. My son's face was pale, my daughter's eyes burning with disbelief. "You reported Dad?" she asked, voice trembling. Sharon stammered, reaching for excuses. I was worried. I thought he was hiding something. I was protecting us." But the words rang hollow. The truth was out. She hadn't protected anyone. She had betrayed us all. From that day forward, the balance in our home shifted. The kids no longer leaned toward her for answers. They came to me. Their disappointment in her was quiet, but it was heavier than anger. And Sharon, for all her plotting, began to realize the control she thought she had was slipping through her fingers. Word travels fast in a small town. The investigators had asked questions of colleagues, banks, and local officials. By the time the case was closed, half the community knew I'd been accused of fraud and cleared. But they also knew where the accusation came from. Neighbors began to pull away from Sharon. Women she once gossiped with at church stopped inviting her to luncheons. One even told me quietly, "She tried to ruin you, Tom." Everyone knows it. At family gatherings, Sharon's seat at the table became lonelier. My son barely spoke to her. My daughter couldn't look at her without anger rising in her voice. They didn't scream, they didn't curse. They just treated her like someone they could no longer trust. And that silence was louder than any rebuke. Sharon tried to spin the story. She claimed she had been concerned about my sudden success, that she'd only acted out of caution. But every word sounded like another excuse. People didn't buy it. My children didn't buy it. And slowly, she stopped trying to explain herself at all. I carried on, my reputation intact, my finances clean, and, more importantly, my children closer than ever. Sharon, meanwhile, was left with the bitter taste of her own choices. She had wagered her marriage and her family on a gamble to keep control, and she lost. And as shame settled over her like a second skin, she did the one thing I never expected. She began to retreat from her own family. Sharon left quietly, the way a storm passes in the night. Loud at first, then nothing but silence in the morning. One day she was still clinging to excuses. The next she was gone, her clothes stripped from the closet, her perfume lingering faintly in the air. She moved into a small apartment across town. The children didn't follow her. Not once. My son said it plainly. "She betrayed you, Dad. She betrayed us too." My daughter was harsher. She cared more about control than family. I can't forgive that. They chose distance, and she felt it like a door slamming shut. From then on, birthdays, holidays, and Sunday dinners carried a strange peace. Her chair stayed empty, and though part of me grieved what had been lost, another part recognized it as freedom. I hadn't destroyed her. She had destroyed herself. News of her actions stayed in circulation longer than she probably imagined. People remembered. The woman who once preened as the center of every gathering was now spoken of in hushed tones, her name tied not to power or status, but to envy and betrayal. I didn't gloat. At 58, you learn that revenge isn't about loud victories. It's about living steady while the one who wronged you unravels in the weight of their own choices. Sharon's shame wasn't something I delivered. It was something she crafted with her own hands. Today, I sit with my children, my grandchildren, and my work. My finances are still strong. My name's still good. Sharon, meanwhile, walks a lonelier road, estranged from the very people she once tried to turn against me. That is the cost of betrayal. She sought control, but what she gained was isolation. And me? I gained peace, the kind that only comes when truth stands taller than lies. If you followed this story to the end, thank you. These stories exist so we can learn, heal, and stand firm against betrayal. Hit like if it resonated, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of justice, strength, and freedom.